Night settles over an eastern Australian creek, with almost no spectacle at all. The surface looks empty. Tea-coloured water moves under hanging roots, past reeds, through silt and drowned leaves. Then the surface breaks for a second, a furred back, a dark tail, a bill that seems borrowed from another branch of life entirely. It vanishes before the eye can settle on it. Underwater there is no cry, no flash of teeth, no obvious drama. There is only pressure, darkness, and an animal built from contradictions. It lays eggs yet feeds milk. It has fur, yet hunts with a sensory system more familiar in fish. The male carries venom. Its body temperature runs lower than most mammals. Even its genome refuses to behave the way a mammal's genome is expected to behave. Today we're diving into the platypus, an animal in which almost nothing seems normal. And that is precisely why it matters. Because the platypus is not nature making a mistake. It is evolution revealing in one living body how strange adaptation can become when survival writes its own logic in isolation, water, and deep time. When Europeans first received preserved platypus specimens from Australia at the end of the 18th century, disbelief arrives before understanding. The animal appears assembled rather than born: duck-like bill, otter-like body, webbed feet, dense fur, broad tail. Some suspect a taxidermy fraud, a stitched curiosity sent from the edge of the known world. George Shaw formally describes it in 1799, but even classification becomes unstable around it. Is it a mammal, a reptile, a bird-like anomaly? The answer eventually is more profound than any single category. The platypus belongs to the monotremes, the small surviving lineage of egg-laying mammals that split from the line leading to placental mammals roughly 166 million years ago. That does not make it a crude rehearsal for higher mammals. It makes it a survivor from a very old branch, still present, still changing, still exquisitely adapted to its own world. The platypus confuses human systems because those systems are built from tidy boundaries. Evolution is not. Evolution keeps what works, modifies what can be modified, and ignores the categories that later observers try to impose. The first lesson of the platypus is that life does not evolve toward neatness. It evolves toward persistence. That persistence begins in darkness underground. After mating, a female platypus digs or refurbishes a nesting burrow, a long hidden tunnel where humidity, insulation, and secrecy can be controlled. She gathers wet nesting material to keep the chamber from drying, because the earliest stage of platypus life is astonishingly vulnerable. After a gestation of about 21 days, she lays 1 to 3 eggs, usually 2. For about 10 days, she curls around them, pressing them against her belly with her tail. This is mammalian motherhood passing through a reptilian doorway: eggs first, then milk. When the young hatch, there are no nipples waiting for them. Milk seeps from specialized patches on the mother's abdomen and pools in the fur, where the hatchlings feed. It is one of the most ancient-looking forms of mammalian lactation still alive. Yet even here the platypus is not merely primitive. Its milk contains a unique antimicrobial protein, thought to help protect young that feed from skin exposed to the microbial world of a burrow rather than from sealed teats. An egg-laying mammal without nipples sounds like a biological contradiction. In practice, it is a coherent system one solution. assembled from inherited parts, refined for a burrowed life beside fresh water. Much of what happens inside that nursery remains poorly observed. Even now, scientists know less than they would like about the hidden days between hatching and the young emerging at summer's end. At dusk, the adult leaves its burrow and enters a different sensory world. Once submerged, the platypus closes its eyes, ears, and nostrils. In effect, it shuts down the senses humans trust most. It does not search the creek by sight. It does not listen for motion in the water. It does not scent its prey. Instead, the bill becomes the animal's interface with the hidden electrical life of the streamed. Buried in the skin are thousands of mechanoreceptors and electroreceptors. About 40,000 specialized electroreceptor cells arranged in stripes across the bill. Tiny muscular contractions in insect larvae, crustaceans, worms, and other bottom-dwelling prey generate weak electric fields. Minute movements create pressure changes. The platypus sweeps its head from side to side and merges both streams of information, triangulating direction and distance in mud-clouded water. This is not a decorative oddity. It is the central hunting strategy of an animal foraging where vision would often fail. Among monotremes, the platypus carries the most elaborate version of this system. Echidnas retain far fewer electroreceptors, and in some species the sense appears reduced to a remnant. In the platypus, however, electroreception has become a masterpiece of specialization, turning a quiet creek into a map of living signals. Everything else about the body supports that underwater life. The fur is dense and insulating, trapping warmth against an animal that forages for long periods in cold, fresh water. The body temperature of the platypus is around 32 degrees Celsius, lower than that of most mammals, and its circulation helps conserve heat in the extremities. In water, it swims not with the whole body undulations of an otter, nor with the hind limb propulsion of a beaver, but largely with alternating strokes of the large webbed front feet. The hind feet and tail serve more as rudders and stabilizers. On land, the same body reveals the cost of compromise. The limbs sprawl out from the sides, and walking is relatively inefficient compared with the upright gait of many terrestrial mammals. The platypus pays an energetic price there, because it is not built to run over open ground. It is built to commute between burrow and stream, to paddle, dive, turn, and excavate. The broad tail stores fat. The claws dig. The bill, soft-looking from a distance, is part sensory array and part foraging tool. To human eyes, the anatomy looks like a collage. To a platypus in a riverbank burrow, it is a precise answer to a precise problem. How to be a small, warm-blooded hunter in cool, murky freshwater. Active mostly in the hours when the world grows dim. Then there is the spur. On the male's hind leg sits one of the rarest weapons in the mammalian world, a venom-delivering system connected to a crural gland. During the breeding season, that gland enlarges, venom production rises, and male aggression intensifies. The evidence suggests the spur is not primarily for routine defense against predators, but for competition with other males. Fresh wounds on males, and reports of temporary partial paralysis in envenomated rivals, point toward reproductive combat venom as a tool in the struggle for access to females. In humans, the effect is not usually fatal, but it can be excruciating. Modern medical accounts describe deep puncture wounds, rapid swelling, pain that can resist ordinary analgesia, and lingering hypersensitivity long after the initial injury. In one recent case, a woman attempting to rescue a wild platypus arrives at an emergency department with severe hand pain, edema spreading up the forearm, and symptoms that persist for weeks. This is the deeper shock of the platypus. Even when it seems almost gentle in motion, it carries a physiology capable of extraordinary force. Mammalian venom is rare enough to seem like an exception to the rule. In the platypus, it becomes another reminder that evolution does not build from a fixed mammalian template. It builds from opportunity, competition, and the chemical possibilities already present in the body. When scientists sequence the platypus genome, the molecular picture proves just as disorienting as the anatomy. The animal's DNA reveals a patchwork of features associated with reptiles, birds, and mammals. Its sex chromosomes are especially striking. Not 2, as in humans, but 10, arranged in a chain during male meiosis. The genetic systems involved in sex determination show stronger similarity to birds than to the familiar mammalian pattern. The genome also illuminates the deeper history behind some of the platypus's strangest traits. Genes linked to milk, venom, and electroreception reveal not chaos, but lineage-specific invention built on ancient components. Platypus venom, for example, contains proteins similar in broad family to those found in reptile venoms, even though platypus and snake venom appear to have evolved independently. Convergence, not inheritance, seems to explain the resemblance, separate lineages arriving at chemically potent solutions from overlapping molecular raw materials. This is why the platypus matters so much to evolutionary biology. It is not simply bizarre. It is informative. It preserves in living tissue evidence of old divergences and alternative mammalian possibilities, paths not taken by placental mammals, but fully viable all the same. Sequencing one female platypus, nicknamed Glennie, becomes a way of reading backward into mammalian history, toward a time when the traits humans now treat as separate categories still occupied a more fluid evolutionary landscape. Even the digestive system refuses normal expectations. The platypus has a short, simple digestive tract and lacks the gastric glands and genes required for a typical acid-secreting peptic mammalian stomach. In practical terms, the stomach is reduced to a thin-walled section, without the familiar chemistry of mammalian digestion. Food passes through a body that no longer relies on the standard gastric toolkit. Why lose something so widespread among mammals? The exact selective route is still debated, but the fact of the loss is clear: evolution can discard as well as invent. Traits that seem universal are only universal until a lineage proves otherwise. In a soft-bodied aquatic diet of larvae, worms, and crustaceans, a conventional stomach may simply have ceased to justify its maintenance. Or its reduction may have emerged through a more complex sequence of changes now partly obscured by time. What matters is that the platypus demonstrates another principle of evolution often missed in popular imagination. Adaptation is not only the addition of novel features, it is also subtraction, simplification, and remodeling. To understand why the platypus seems impossible, it helps to see that life is not always becoming more elaborate. Sometimes it becomes more specific. PMC, this specificity, is why the platypus should not be described as a living fossil in any simplistic sense. The phrase suggests something static, an old design left untouched. But the platypus is not a museum specimen that somehow kept breeding. It is a modern animal under modern selection. Its ancient lineage explains its deep divergence, not its current success. The bill is not a relic. It is an active sensory organ of remarkable sophistication. The venom system is not a leftover curiosity. It is tied to present reproductive competition. The milk is not just primitive secretion. It contains specialized antimicrobial defense. Even the comparison with echidnas makes the point. Both are monotremes, yet the platypus has taken one possible monotreme body plan toward freshwater predation, while echidnas have taken another toward terrestrial ant and termite feeding. One lineage amplifies electroreception to extraordinary levels. The other retains far less of it. Evolution does not preserve weirdness for its own sake. It preserves what works in a given ecological setting. The platypus looks like a collage because human language keeps separating features that natural selection is free to combine. Fur, eggs, milk, venom, electroreception, none of these are mutually exclusive if they each improve survival or reproduction in the same lineage. And yet survival is no longer guaranteed simply because a design has worked for millions of years. The platypus is currently listed as near threatened globally, and its decline appears to be driven not by one overwhelming enemy, but by many pressures arriving together: river regulation, habitat destruction, fragmentation of waterways, reduced flows, pollution, entanglement in illegal nets and enclosed traps, predation by foxes and feral dogs, and disease in some populations. Climate change adds a harder layer of instability. During and after Australia's Black Summer fires, researchers begin tracking platypus DNA in water samples across fire-affected and unaffected sites. Environmental DNA offers a way to monitor an elusive, mostly nocturnal animal without having to catch it. The results suggest that severe fire followed by intense rainfall may hit platypuses particularly hard. Ash, unstable soil, and debris wash into creeks, altering the invertebrate communities the animals depend on. At sites where heavy rainfall follows high-severity fire across a large part of the watershed, the probability of platypus occupancy drops dramatically, sometimes to below 10%. Burrows may shield individuals from flames, but not from the collapse of the aquatic food web outside. This is where the platypus becomes more than an icon of strangeness. It becomes an indicator of freshwater vulnerability, a quiet measure of what happens when whole catchments are pushed beyond their normal rhythms. There is a temptation, when faced with an animal this unusual, to treat every trait as a spectacle and move on. But the deeper story is not that the platypus is bizarre. The deeper story is that every so-called absurdity has a context. The eggs belong to a mammalian lineage that never abandoned egg-laying. The milk belongs to that same lineage's solution for nourishing young. The lack of nipples is not an omission. It is part of the system. The bill's sensory equipment belongs to a predator operating in turbid water at night. The spur belongs to seasonal male conflict. The reduced stomach belongs to a digestive path that no longer resembles the standard mammalian model. And still, despite centuries of fascination, much of platypus life remains frustratingly obscure. Researchers still speak openly about what they do not know: the fine details of maternal behavior inside burrows, the fate of young after they emerge, the long-term effects of repeated fire and drought. the thresholds beyond which a local population does not recover. The platypus lives close enough to human settlements to become famous, yet hidden enough to remain partially unknowable. That tension, visibility without full understanding, may be one reason it feels so haunting. So the platypus leaves us in an unusual place. It does not simply broaden the definition of a mammal, it exposes how provisional all definitions can be. Human taxonomy asks for boundaries. Evolution answers with histories. In one creek-dwelling body, old reproductive patterns, novel sensory systems, chemical weaponry, and mammalian care coexist without contradiction, because nature never needed them to fit a lecture diagram. And the more closely science looks, the less this animal resembles a joke of anatomy, and the more it resembles a document or own, written across millions of years of separation, adaptation, and survival in freshwater margins. Yet the document is incomplete. We can sequence the genome, sample the water for traces of its DNA, describe its milk proteins and venom peptides, and still fail to know what happens in all the hidden hours beneath root tangles and within sealed burrows. The platypus persists there, in the dark water and the old sediment, not as an answer to the question of what a mammal should be, but as a reminder that life is always larger than the categories built to contain it. And perhaps that is why it remains so arresting, because even now, after all the papers, specimens, and genomes, the animal still slips under the surface, carrying part of its meaning with it.